Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Every school has that one place adults tell you not to worry about, because adults don't like admitting they're worried too. At Northview High, it was the old locker room buried under the gym, a concrete rectangle of chipped paint and metal benches that had been temporarily closed since before I was a freshman. The door was the problem. It never quite shut. The heavy steel slab hung a fraction off its frame, leaving a blade-thin gap that breathed when the building did. When the HVAC kicked on, the door sighed. When a storm rolled through, it trembled and clicked like teeth. People said it was the acoustics or the draft from the pool next door or a hinge that should have been replaced 10 years ago. The rumors were mostly jokes. "It's haunted," the cross-country kids said when we jogged past after practice. "Someone died down there," the theater techs whispered while rolling flats through the corridor. We laughed because that's what you do when a place makes your skin crawl for reasons you can't name. By junior year, I knew the route by heart, cut behind the trophy cases, down the short flight of stairs that smelled like floor cleaner and old sweat, past the pebbled glass window that never showed anything but your own reflection. The sign on the door read, "Storage keep out." Someone had added in Sharpie, "Seriously." Another hand, different handwriting, had drawn a wobbly smiley face beneath it. The smile looked off, like it knew something we didn't. Coaches still sent us to the old room, even though everyone pretended they didn't. The new equipment closet upstairs was always too full, too locked, or too far from where anyone actually needed the gear. If you played anything that involved a ball, eventually you were the kid who got the keys. 2 minutes, Coach said. Grab 3 basketballs and a pump. He tossed me the key ring like it was nothing, like it didn't matter which door those teeth turned. I didn't go alone if I could avoid it. That wasn't fear, exactly more like a superstition I'd upgraded into a habit. That afternoon I dragged Maya and Theo with me, 2 people who weren't superstitious about anything. The 3 of us clattered down the steps in our sneakers, still talking about the game script Coach wanted us to memorize, still pretending we didn't notice the temperature drop, or the way the noise from the gym above suddenly went hollow, as if the sound had been swallowed. From up close, the door was uglier than I remembered. Gray paint blistered in kidney-shaped bubbles, a patchwork of old repairs like scabs. Where the handle met the plate, the metal had faint scratches in arcs and spirals, the kind bored hands make when they're waiting. The smell leaking from the gap wasn't mildew, our school's favorite perfume, but something flatter and human. Damp dust, laundry that should have been hung sooner, the ghost of chlorine. Theo nudged my elbow. "Come on, Nancy Drew." He said it lightly, the way you talk when you want your voice to sound bigger than the room. The key turned with a reluctant thunk. The door didn't swing so much as peel inward, rubber seal catching on concrete before it gave. Light from the hallway slid across the floor in a thin stripe that reached 20 feet and then stopped, suffocated by the interior's fluorescent fixtures that never, ever worked. We'd brought our phones for light, everyone always did, and our beams landed on the familiar geometry. Bench, abandoned weight rack, dented lockers lined up like a row of closed mouths. Nothing moved, no dripping pipes, no shifting shadows, just dust, so much dust that our footprints wrote our names in it. Maya did the obvious thing, stomped forward, rattled a locker door to prove it was empty, then grinned back at me like we'd all just survived a dare. I smiled, but it didn't hold. Something about the room was wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't colder inside, it was quieter, the kind of quiet that presses a hand over your mouth. My phone's light found the far wall where the old whiteboard still hung. It was clean, except for a faint rectangle where someone had once taped up a poster and then taken it down, leaving behind a brighter ghost. 3 balls and a pump, Theo said, as if saying the mission out loud would keep us from inventing a different one. We found the rolling cage near the back, the netting zip-tied, closed like a wallet in a bad neighborhood. I cut through with the equipment key, grabbed the first 3 decent-looking balls, tossed one to Maya. The rubber thud bounced around the room in a way that sounded wrong, too duller, like the walls were full of cloth. "Let's go," I said, more abruptly than I meant to, and half turned toward the door before something in my peripheral vision snagged me, the smallest, stupidest thing. A strand of clear tape hanging from a locker vent, like someone had ripped a notice down in a hurry and missed a piece. The tape fluttered in a breeze that shouldn't have existed. Maya followed my gaze. "Probably from the inspection," she said. "They tag everything down here." She said it the way people talk about facts they want to be true. We moved as a unit, 3 shadows orbiting each other, all pretending not to look for the same thing. Evidence that we weren't the first people in here this week. The floor told the story we wanted a uniform skin of dust, undisturbed. I almost let the room off the hook. Then the door behind us changed. It didn't slam. It didn't even move much. It simply settled a half-inch, like something on the other side had shifted its weight. The rubber seal squealed softly against the frame. All 3 of us stopped breathing at the same time, a reflex we didn't plan. "Building settling," Theo said, which sounded exactly like what a building would say if it could talk. I walked to the doorway, 1 slow step, and then another, until I could lean out into the corridor. It was bright out there, the kind of bright that makes everything look honest and empty. Just a strip of safety tape lifting at the corner, a scuffed floor waxing the last of the day's light, and the glossy glass of the pebbled window reflecting my own face back to me with its weird, melted texture. When I turned, I saw the hinge for the first time the way a janitor would. 1 screw slightly proud of the plate, a hairline crack running like a vein down the paint. Fixable, boring. I clung to that word as I locked up, slipping the key back out with the same scrape that had probably made the squeal in the first place. Back upstairs, the gym looked brighter than it had any right to. Kids shouting, whistles blowing, sneakers squealing. Noise poured over me like water and washed the locker room from my skin. I told myself we were done with that door. We had what we came for. That was that. It would have stayed that simple if we hadn't passed by again the next day and seen that the gap was wider just a fraction, but enough. Enough to notice how the draft set the loose end of that clear tape moving back and forth, like a finger beckoning us in. I told myself it was the building breathing. It would be almost a week before we realized something else was breathing too. The thing about a draft is you expect it to come from somewhere. A vent, a crack in the ceiling tile, a window that won't quite shut. But down in that locker room, the tape kept swaying even when the air was still. By Tuesday, more details began stacking up, too small on their own to mean anything, too sharp to ignore when stitched together. The first was the footprints. Not ours, we'd already left a trail across the dust the day before. These were fresher, lighter, like the shoes had been pressed carefully, heel to toe, in a deliberate line that snaked deeper into the corner of the room we hadn't explored. The pattern wasn't random. Whoever left them wanted to stay hidden. The second was the locker door. Number 14. I swear we'd seen it shut. Now it hung open 2 inches, its vents breathing the same thin smell that had clung to my hands since the first visit. Chlorine and old laundry. Inside, wedged between rust and paint chips, was something impossible to dismiss. A towel, damp to the touch. Theo dropped it as soon as he realized what it was. "It's staged," he said, even though his voice cracked the way it only did when he knew he was lying. And the third, what broke the joke wide open, was the notebook. Maya found it sitting on the bench like it had been waiting. A spiral-bound green cover, the kind the school store sold for $2. She flipped through absent-mindedly at first, expecting chemistry notes or math doodles. Then the pages turned, and her face drained as white as the paper itself. Every line was dates, times, and names, schedules. Jamie, locker 102, arrive 7:12. Coach leaves early Thursday, 5:45. Theo sits east bleachers, third period free. And then, written in jagged black ink across a fresh page, Wednesday, 6:30. Maya, Theo, Chris, back again. We all froze, reading the words at the same time, each syllable crawling into our heads like an insect burrowing. The notebook didn't predict our return. It recorded it. Someone had seen us yesterday, someone close enough to know what we carried, who we were, how long we'd stayed. Theo's voice was barely audible. This is a prank, has to be. But the handwriting was shaky, inconsistent, like it belonged to someone who hadn't practiced in years. Someone older. Maya shut the notebook so fast, the metal spiral squealed. She shoved it back onto the bench like it burned. "We're leaving," she whispered. We ran not up the stairs exactly, but out. As though if we stayed another breath longer, the door would shut behind us and the sigh of the hinges would sound like laughter. By the time we hit the gym, the noise above felt unreal again, voices bubbling like nothing existed below them. I kept the basketball pressed hard to my chest, as though it might anchor me to the ordinary world. We swore we'd never go back. We even promised out loud, hand to heart, the way kids do when they're terrified enough to believe in promises. But Wednesday came anyway, and when the night practice ended late, and I found myself walking that same corridor alone, the air still smelled like chlorine, and the tape on the locker vent wasn't just swaying, it had been torn away. Wednesday nights were supposed to be harmless. Late practice, tired muscles, the sharp smell of sweat and varnished wood. The sound of a basketball thudding against the gym floor was a lullaby I'd grown up with, predictable, safe. But that night, when everyone else had left and the echoes died out, the gym stopped feeling like a place for games. It felt like a stage with no audience, and I was the only actor left. I was stuffing jerseys into the laundry bag when I heard it, a faint breathing, not mine. Not shallow like someone hiding a cough, not deep like a snore. Steady, slow, close. It was coming from the stairwell. I told myself it was pipes, or the ventilation system, or even my imagination filling in the silence. But when I walked toward the exit, the breathing seemed to follow, growing louder with each step until the hairs on my neck prickled. The hallway outside the gym was lined with fluorescent bulbs that buzzed overhead, each one casting a circle of light. As I walked, they began to flicker, then die one after another like someone was snapping them off as I passed. Click, click, click. Darkness closed in behind me, funneling me forward toward the stairwell where the air grew colder. And then, at the far end of the corridor, I saw it. The locker room door. Only this time, it wasn't half shut. It was wide open. From inside, the breathing was louder now. Wet, deliberate, like lungs that had learned patience in the dark. I froze, clutching the laundry bag to my chest like it could shield me. My phone's flashlight shook in my hand as I raised it toward the opening. The beam landed on the floor, first dust disturbed in wide, dragging arcs, as though something had been pulled across the cement. Then, on the lockers, some shut, some ajar, vents yawning, and finally, caught in the center of the light, the thing that made my throat close. A shadow, not Mina. not cast by anything I could see. A tall, stretched figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the room, its edges shimmering like heat haze. I blinked, and it was gone, but the breathing stayed. The door began to swing inward, slowly, silently, as if someone inside was pulling it shut, pulling me in with it. That was when I ran. I don't remember the stairs. I don't remember the gym. I only remember bursting into the night air outside, lungs burning, ears filled with the sound of my own heart. And even there, with the moon overhead and the cool wind on my face, I swore I could still hear it. That same patient breathing, like whatever had lived in that locker room was no longer trapped there. The next morning I told myself I'd imagined it. Kids see things. Shadows stretch where they don't belong. A locker creaks in the dark and your brain fills in the blanks. But then Maya found me before first period, holding her phone with both hands like it weighed more than a brick. "Chris," she whispered, "you need to see this." On her screen was a photo, not one she had taken, but one of me. The angle was unmistakable. The shot came from the stairwell looking down, the exact spot I'd frozen in last night. In the photo, I was clutching the laundry bag, my flashlight raised, my mouth half open in shock. Behind me, in the grain of the image, you could just make out the open door. Someone had been there, watching, photographing. By lunchtime, the rumor had spread. Theo swore he'd seen movement in the gym balcony. Other kids said their lockers had been opened, contents shuffled, notebooks missing. One girl even claimed she heard whispers through the vents during practice, a voice murmuring names she couldn't recognize. It was enough to draw the attention of the administration, and then, finally, the police. That night, officers swept the building. When they reached the old locker room, what they found made the jokes die for good. Behind the last row of dented metal lockers was a space that wasn't supposed to exist. A hollow cavity, drywall patched poorly to disguise it. Inside was a sleeping bag crumpled on the floor, empty cans of soup, bottles of water, candy wrappers stacked neatly as though someone had been keeping count. And worse, a tiny camera screwed into the vent, lens pointed straight at the benches where athletes changed. The man who had been living there wasn't a ghost at all. He was real, flesh and bone and hunger. A drifter in his 30s, once a student at the same school before being expelled years ago for behavioral issues. His name was buried in old records, Robert Halpern, but among the few who remembered him, he'd earned another title, the boy who never left. The police caught him 2 days later, sleeping in a storage shed not half a mile away. His backpack contained 2 more notebooks filled with timetables, names, and crude sketches of students' faces drawn over and over until the pencil tore through the page. When they led him past the flashing lights of the patrol cars, his eyes scanned the crowd of onlookers. For a moment, they landed on me, and then he smiled. Not a grin, not a sneer. Just a small, knowing smile like he was acknowledging a secret only we shared. And in that instant, I knew. The breathing I heard in the dark hadn't been my imagination. It had been his. After the arrest, the school locked the old locker room for good. Heavy chains looped through the handle, a warning sign nailed crooked across the door. No entry, by order of police. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. For weeks afterward, whispers rippled through the halls like a second language. Students passed each other with wide eyes and lowered voices. The question wasn't if you knew what had happened, it was how much you knew. Who had seen the notebooks? Who had been watched? Every athlete who'd ever changed in that room carried the same silent fear. Had he recorded me? The girls on the volleyball team began skipping practices. The wrestling squad refused to shower at school, going home sticky with sweat. Even teachers avoided the gym basement, glancing away from the stairwell like it was a wound the building itself couldn't heal. Parents demanded answers at the next board meeting. How could someone live beneath the gym for months, maybe longer, without being noticed? How many complaints about strange noises had been ignored? The administration offered apologies, security upgrades, new locks and cameras. But no one bought it, because the truth was worse than negligence. The truth was comfort. We had all believed the school was safe because we wanted it to be. It was easier to laugh off the rumors, to call the door haunted, than to admit someone real could be behind it. That was the lesson that stung the most. Ghosts don't scare me anymore. Not the kind in books or movies or whispered in cafeteria corners. What scares me are the people who decide they don't want to leave. The ones who find cracks in the walls we never thought to seal. Even now, the school feels different. The echo of sneakers on the gym floor sounds hollow. The slam of a locker makes hearts jump. And every time a vent rattles or a draft sneaks through the hallway, students flinch as if it's not air moving but breath. His breath. And though Robert Halpern sits in a cell miles away, some nights I still wake with the feeling that someone is watching from the shadows of my room. Someone patient, quiet, waiting for the chance to smile at me again. Because he wasn't just hiding in the locker room, he was hiding in plain sight. And for months, none of us wanted to believe it. The chains on the locker room door were supposed to be final. A visible scar across the mouth of a wound the school didn't want to reopen. For the most part, it worked. No one dared walk down the basement steps anymore, not even the janitors. The door stayed silent, sealed, its peeling paint hidden under the glare of the fluorescent lights above. But silence has a way of making people listen harder. Every once in a while, someone swore they still heard noises, footsteps dragging just beyond the chains, or the faint echo of a cough in the middle of the night when the gym was empty. The cameras the school installed upstairs never caught anything unusual, but the stories spread anyway. Sophomores whispered about seeing a face in the vent during practice, pale and watchful. A freshman claimed he heard his own name whispered from the stairwell, even though he was alone. And then there were the notebooks. The 2 police confiscated weren't the only ones. Months later, another was found stuffed inside a duct above the bleachers. No fingerprints, no explanation. Just pages filled with names, times, and words scratched deep into the paper. Not done. That was the part none of us wanted to think about. Because if Robert Halpern had been keeping such meticulous records, what if he hadn't been alone? Sometimes at night, I replay the moment I saw that shadow standing in the locker room. The one that shimmered and vanished as soon as my light touched it. My brain tells me it was him. My fear makes me wonder if it wasn't, if the breathing I heard was only his, or if something else was down there, waiting in the dark, learning patience. The school can chain the door, the police can take him away. But the truth seeps out like air through a crack. We'll never really know what lived in those walls, or how long it watched us. And maybe that's the real horror. Not the man who was caught, but the question he left behind.